What's up? It's Matt. We're back with another Restaurant Expert Roundup. Today, we have the man, the myth, the legend, RestaurantTopia, the podcast, Hillcrest Foods, David Ross. We'll be back in a second. Okay, Mr. Ross, tell the internet world who you are, where you're from, and all that good stuff.
Matt, awesome to be on, man. In fact, I was honored to be called an expert for this. But then when you said man, the myth, the legend, my mind exploded. I haven't heard that one. But no, Dave Ross. I'm the chief sales officer at Hillcrest Food Service in Cleveland, Ohio. We're a broadline food service distributor and service primarily all restaurants all across Northeast Ohio and Columbus. Been here 15 years, worked my way up through a lot of different positions, but now overseeing all our sales and purchasing.
So I'm going to guess the last year feels like 15 years, right?
Oh, yeah, it's been crazy. Yeah, it's been a crazy, stressful time for restaurants as well as distributors. Yeah, for sure.
So also talk about the podcast.
So the podcast RestaurantTopia has been let's see, we started in January of 2020, and it really started with me, Brian Seitz, and Anthony Hamilton. Brian's a good friend and runs our legal and acquisitions, and then Anthony's a chef who was a customer of ours, and we brought on board as kind of our corporate chef. And so the three of us decided to start a podcast, really just to see if we could do something with it, just to get some information out and just kind of play around. And we all liked the idea, and as some critics will say, we like hearing ourselves talk. So we did that, and then if you imagine January we start, the pandemic hits in March of 2020, and we're like, crap, we've got something here that we can get information out quick to customers and local independent restaurants, which is who we serve. So we did some webinars, we did some PPP loan stuff, we did all this kind of stuff, and then I said, we've got something here, and then we just started, cranking it out weekly, and now we're going on almost 2 years, and it's been fun, and hopefully there's some value.
Yeah, that's a huge accomplishment, too. A lot of people don't realize that everybody's got a podcast, but podcasts usually die about 3 or 4 months in. People give up on them. That's how we found you. Was we look for podcasts that are impacting the restaurant business, that have a voice that people need to know about, and that also are consistent. I can't tell you how many podcasts I come across that look cool, and I'm like, they haven't done an episode in 8 months, in a year, in 2 years. Like, what happened? And that's how we found you. And I've listened to some of the episodes. Great stuff. I wish I was in my podcast studio today. We have a new studio at our offices, but I got stuck out on the road. So I'm not in there in the fun stuff with the cool little headphones on and the microphone. I feel like I'm flying a plane when I'm in there. So let's talk about that. You started the podcast before the pandemic hit. It seems like it's been like 5 years ago. It was only about 18 to 20 months ago. Restaurants have been stressed.
This Gray was not here when this started.
There was no gray there, and you had a mullet and a full head of hair, right?
Oh yeah, full head of hair. You should have seen it. It was amazing.
But I was talking to some people the other day. I was out in San Diego at a conference, and we specialize in the restaurant business. I've got friends in every industry. There hasn't been an industry, I don't think, that I know of hit like it has been, because certain industries have been hit with labor issues, certain industries have been hit with supply chain, some places have been hit with shutdowns. The restaurant business has been hit with everything. Shutdowns, can't get employees, can't get food. It's got to be one of the only ones hit to that magnitude. I guess let's talk the first part of it, the supply chain, because there's cargo ships everywhere. My wife is Miss Political. She tells me all this crap that's on the news. I don't watch it. If there's boats floating places with the stuff on them. But restaurants are having a lot of trouble right now getting products to actually operate, right?
Yeah, no question. I think that, there's definitely, and you've seen it if you've watched the news, and I don't watch news either, but you see the container ships and you see all that stuff. But it is, to live in it day to day, because I'm also not only overseeing our sales here at Hillcrest, but I also oversee our purchasing. So the majority of my time now is spent on the purchasing end of our business, because that's what needs the most assistance. Because it's been crazy to get product, and everybody's got, at this point, it's almost like everybody's got all the same reasons. It's labor, it's containers, it's COVID scares. It's all those different things, but it all comes down to a lot of suppliers not being able to keep up with the demand. And then you got the restaurant business kind of bounce back, quickly. So it's been a bottleneck for sure, and it's affecting every restaurant.
So what do you recommend with restaurants? So granted, I would imagine if I was you, I'd be greedy. You want 100% of everything, but you've got independent restaurants out there that have opportunity to buy from the big boys, the smaller vendors, probably specialty places. What do they do to protect themselves to make sure that they have a supplier like Hillcrest, that something shows up when it's supposed to show up, or that it's available?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is flexibility and the ability to pivot. So don't get yourself pigeonholed into, I got to have this on my menu. I have to have this price point. Because everything's changing, because with the supply chain being crazy, pricing is also going up. I mean, we do what we call a cost of goods analysis for our customers, which looks at average price for a period of time versus average price for a previous period of time. And I'm seeing everything from as low as 6-7% all the way up to 20% inflation. Okay.
Wow.
That'll put a restaurant out of business, if you don't make the right moves on the menu. So, I think that you gotta be flexible. You can't have the old school, like, this is how it is. And you gotta be able to pivot. And no different than when, excuse me, the restaurants shut down the indoor dining and they had to pivot to carry out, or they had to pivot to, how do I pay my lease, or how do I get an extension? All those different things. It's no different now. Yep. We have to keep doing that. And we're in a pivotal time in this industry that if you're not doing that, it's probably not going to be good.
Yeah. And I was talking about food costs, something that I get your feedback on that really surprised me. And I'm not a restaurant guy. I actually start a job next week. I'm going to be working part-time in one of our clients' restaurants to get to know front of house better. Because I'm like, you know what? I preach a lot of this stuff. I've coached it. I've watched it. I've not done it. So Matt Plapp's going to be a cashier soon. But talking about the cost of goods and things of that nature, I was talking to a restaurant. I was in South Carolina. I guess it was last week, 2 weeks ago, speaking at the South Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association show. I was talking to a couple of restaurants afterwards, and we were talking about food costs. I have this idea that I haven't seen it out there at this capacity. I'm like, man, how cool would it be if whoever you get your product from, that you can easily import that into a software that updates a digital menu on the fly on your website. That way, market price.
I think I lost your sound there, Matt. I don't know if you can hear me, but I lost you. Sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah, I lost your sound for some reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you. Sorry.
I don't know what happened. I had a disruption on my phone and it took away. But I was talking about the opportunity that, restaurants could be market pricing. They could have change. Like, I'm not going to go to my favorite restaurant. Something's 12 cents more, 13 cents more. And those pennies add up. But this operator brought up something. He's like, man, I want to tell you somewhere I screwed up big time the last year. I'm like, what? He said, well, I never thought about my paper goods and my napkins and all that stuff, the cost of it. He's like, we always had it factored in normally. When we raised our menu prices recently, we didn't think about the fact that we're 60% takeout now. We were 5% takeout before the pandemic. We didn't calculate that in there. And we literally are looking like, you might think it's a little thing, but it could be 20, 30, 40 cents, $1 per person.
No, for sure. And that's why it's very important to, as Brian called it on the podcast, like, be a student of the game. Like a lot of, the local independent restaurateur does great things, but there's certain things in details that sometimes gets missed. And that's some of those things, you look at it and you're like, man, so what are your KPIs that you have set up, that you can look at on a weekly or sometimes even daily basis to know, like, what's happening with my business, because every penny counts in that business, no question.
Yeah, and I was surprised he was telling me some of the costs of, the to-go items, the napkins, the forks, the styrofoam, and how he's, had to have inconsistencies because some things are out. But it was just, to me, it was surprising. I think a lot of times consumers, if you're not on that side of the business, you don't think about it. But I mean, you take 20 cents, you get a restaurant that's got 500 customers a day at 20 cents or $1. I mean, whole crap, that could add up really quick.
Yeah, and I think going back to the flexibility, like, what I thought was funny, and not everybody's done it, but a lot of people went to QR codes. They put them on the table, or they, whatever, for the menus to pull it up, and then you got it on your phone. But then when things started to loosen up and the dining rooms opened and some of the restrictions went away, masks went away in Ohio, and I know there's other places they have different restrictions as far as geographics, but all of a sudden I got a menu now. Like, why did the restaurateur go back to a menu? You had an opportunity to stay with technology that allowed you to change it on the fly, and
Yep.
you gave the customer a menu again. I'm like, what are you doing? So we're actually coaching up some of our customers and working on some technology to get them back into that, because I think that's something that should stick.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, number one, I don't want a sticky menu in my hand, which is what happens, or a paper one with somebody else's prior ketchup on it. I've always thought that the phone was the best place to have the menu. Everybody's got them. I mean, I go to dinner with my wife and my daughter last night at Rapid Fire Pizza in Florence, and I don't take my phone to when we go out to dinner. They do. And so I'm sitting there watching them. They're both on their phone. It's not hard for them to scan a QR code, look at their
Yeah.
phone. Number one, you can update the pricing way quicker. Number two, there's no cost to it for the most part. And number three, you can put some dynamic images and videos and customer generated content. But I'll give you a tip. I think if you're going to coach your clients, I'll give you a tip that I haven't seen many people talking about, is that you need to have two menus on your website. You need to have the menu that's an exact menu, a different location. One of them is going to be available if I go to the website. If I were to go to, davidsburgers.com, and there's the menu I would see. The other one is going to be not available on the site to be found, but it's going to be the one that comes from in store. So that QR code goes to a standalone page in the website. But the reason I do it differently is now that I know that anybody who lands on that page is currently in the restaurant. And that allows me to do a couple things. I can change my messaging on that page at the header, my call to actions. I can also now retarget people advertising Facebook, YouTube, Google, Instagram, based on they've been in the website. Like, hey, you can run a Facebook ad. We appreciate your recent visit. Let us know how we did, or whatever it might be. Whereas if you do that to your regular menu, you're going to get a lot of people in there that just happen to find it or were there anyways.
Right. No, I love that idea. That's a great tip. That's a pro tip, as we call it. Yeah.
Pro tip. So talk about the differences, because I'm curious in that, because there are the big boys. I talked to Steven from Woolco Foods recently, who on this episode, on one of these episodes, from New York. I know people at US Foods, at Cisco, at PFG, at Presto, at all these places. What are some of the differences if you're talking to an independent operator who might have a relationship with XYZ company? What's the difference between a big national conglomerate or the local, like with Hillcrest?
Well, here's the thing, all filled with probably great people and great businesses, just a different model. So if you're a local independent restaurant, all of us are doing the same thing. We're buying a box, we're putting it in our warehouse, we're warehousing it, we're putting it on a truck and delivering to your restaurant. It's not very sexy. It's distribution. Okay, we're all doing the same thing.
Yep.
However, when you're with some of the bigger box companies, like you had mentioned, you're, as a local independent restaurant, there's really no reason to be in that ecosphere, because people feel that it's kind of like the Walmart effect, or Costco effect. Like if you go into Costco in Cincinnati and I go into Costco in Cleveland, we're probably paying the same price for a case of water, right?
Yep.
But if I buy 20 cases of water a week and you only buy one, we're still paying the same price. That's not how the food service restaurant industry works. It's all based on volume and what you distribute to the restaurant. So it really comes down to the analogy of big fish, little pond, or big fish in the ocean. You know what I mean? So when you're with the Cisco's, US Foods, GFS that have the national footprint, they've already given away the lower pricing to those national footprint customers. You, as a one unit or 2 unit or even 5 unit local independent restaurant in that particular area, aren't as big of a deal as they are. They've already given that savings away. So to paint it as easily as I can, if Cisco's gross profit margin is 18% and they're already charging Applebee's 12, what do you think they need to charge Matt's Burger Shack in order to average 18?
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
20, 28, 30% in order to hit their stockholders' 18% number. So that's the first thing, is just the math problem doesn't work for a local independent restaurant. We have the same math problem at Hillcrest. Just the difference is, you don't need as much volume to be a big deal. And we don't service national chains. So we're giving it away to large volume operators in our area, where if you buy $500 a week, you're not getting the same price as a guy that buys 5,000 or 50,000. So it's the same math problem. It's just different. As a local independent operator, you should be buying from a local guy. You just should.
What about the places I see that have like 3 or 4 trucks? Like I've got a restaurant, I won't mention the brand near me, that I have seen every truck there at some point. Why do restaurants have Is it just because they can't get product, or is it because they don't want to fire a relationship? But I got to imagine there's probably got to be buying power to not having 5 different food companies coming into your restaurant instead of one.
Yeah, no, I think that depending on, I mean, everybody's got a different response to that, why they do it. You could have a chef that wants to have the best meat guy and the best produce guy and the best seafood guy and the best, he wants to have his gamut that he thinks are the best of the best. But at the end of the day, we're in distribution. I'm not making anything. I'm buying a box and I'm selling it to you. You know what I mean? So I could carry the same thing that guy carries. You know what I mean? Like so we can do that. It's not like there's no manufacturing done here at Hillcrest. We're just distribution. So, you're right. To put your buying power more centralized is very important. You know what I mean? Because you're going to be able to get the best deals and the best service. And I call it like, and I think this is changing with the younger generation, but I think there's an older school thought process that, I'm the customer. Customer is always right. Like, so as a distributor, sometimes you're a little bit abused of like, well, what's your price and this and that, and you just need to bring it out to me because I need it, and yeah, I know I messed up, but you need to do it. Like, where I think there needs to be more of a partnership, and you have to understand as a restaurateur, how do I become important to the distributor so that I get the best pricing, I get the best service, I get the best quality, and those things should be top of mind to have the best partnership.
Yeah, and I heard a restaurant owner in South Carolina. We were shooting America's Best Restaurant episode last week, and he has 3 locations, and we were talking about, no, he has 6 locations. We were talking about the item who he used. And he said, I used to work for a restaurant that every other week, the owner, we would spend 5 or 6 hours like shopping. Who's got the price on tomatoes? He's like, we ordered differently every couple of weeks based on who had the better prices on this or that. And he's like, Matt, my restaurant, I've got one place. I order from one company. I order everything. I let them know, like, hey, we have a partnership. I understand I'm going to probably pay a little more here, a little less there. But when I look at it, I have an hour to order. The restaurant I was at 7 years ago, it would take us 5 hours to put an order together because of all the back and forth. And he's like, also, then I didn't have as good of a friend in the business as I have now, when I have one person that's been my place for 5 years.
No, there's no better way to put it. It's about a partnership. It really is, because when you look at a restaurant, you're spending anywhere from 25 to 40% of your sales back into this distributor, to operate. I mean, it's your largest, it's most likely your largest spend in your organization. So you should have a good partnership. You should have a good relationship. You should care about it. And for us, it's really family. As kitschy as that sounds, like, our customers are like, they're our best friends. They're people that we know their kids' names. We know their birthdays. We know, like, it's an intimate thing. And because we go to that level, I feel, separates us, from somebody that's more of a number on a spreadsheet. You know what I mean?
Yep. So last question, talking about things you see, opportunities. We talked about the menu. I think I agree with you completely. I think there is something to be said about some restaurants with the menu, but I think the majority can get away with a QR code and have a much better experience and have prices on the fly. What is something else, like one of the little things you've seen the last couple months that you want restaurant owners to really take a hold of and start doing a little differently?
Well, I'm going to say something that might not be popular, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think that a lot of the operators that I know and are customers of mine that have great culture, great organizations, great training, they don't have labor problems right now. Yeah. Okay. I think the restaurant industry, especially the local restaurateur, I think a lot of the things the pandemic uncovered were past sins, you know what I mean? And maybe some things that they did a little bit loose, or they did, they threw the guy in a dish tank with no training, or they hired the server. And, Anthony tells a story about his daughter getting a job in second day at this national chain restaurant, and there's nobody to train her. She's there at day 2 and there's nobody there to train her. You know what I mean? So you're like, whoa, we have so much turnover. So when I look at it, I think, like, you have to really reflect on your operation and say, am I operating this the best way? Am I setting my employees up for success? Because I think that's what's going to cure the labor problem. If you think you're just going to come in and go, we're going to go from $12 to $15 an hour, or to $18 an hour, or $20 an hour, and you think that's going to fix all your labor issues, I think I don't think it's, me personally, that's not going to work. Now, that's a piece of the puzzle potentially, but that's not what's going to work. You got to love your people. You got to care for them. You got to train them right. And you got to make sure that they know you care about them.
Do you know who David Scott Peters is by any chance?
I don't.
No. So David Scott Peters wrote the book Restaurant Prosperity Formula, and he spoke at South Carolina with me recently. Shoot me your address, I'll send you a copy. I have some in my office. Awesome book. And I speak with him in 2 weeks at the Alaska show, which is in Vegas, ironically, but it's in a couple weeks. And he did a session on that in South Carolina. And he had this chart. I wish I knew what it was. I'll have to send it to you. I'll post it in the comments of this. But it was a chart of the 5 different things that you got to have all 10 on both sides of it to have awesome workforce. And he said the same thing as like a lot of restaurants he consults with nationwide don't have hiring problems because their culture doesn't suck, because they treat their people great. They've treated their people great. He's like, I'm going to give you a fix, but guess what? It's going to take you 12 to 18 months. It's not going to happen in a month.
Yeah.
And he talked with a lot of the same things you talked about there, same exact thing. And but the chart was pretty cool. It literally just talked about all these different elements that if you miss one of them, if you don't have all 5 on both sides of the equation, if you miss one of them, it screws the whole thing up. And he's like, unfortunately, a lot of restaurants were missing 2 or 3 of them the last 10 years with how they treated people, with how they didn't train people. And I'll give you another one that I bring up a lot with our clients that I said, I've got a 19-year-old daughter. I've got a 7-year-old son. My son works at a pizza place when he's not playing football. And my daughter has worked in multiple places. They want to go somewhere that's perceived cool, that's perceived as a great place, that's got a good vibe. And one of the easiest ways to start that process is social media. Is like, I can't tell you the number of restaurants that I know that are the owners not, and even the management's not active on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. I mean, get on there. Show the cool stuff. Like I saw one the other day where they were highlighting the company bowling party. Hey, guess what? We closed the restaurant today because we're out drinking beers and bowling down the street. And they chronicle these journeys, and so that people like on the outside see that's a cool place. I like it. Whereas if you're a typical fast casual restaurant that lets corporate do all your posting because you're a franchise and it's the same crap pictures of sandwiches 7 days a week, nobody cares. There's no personality. And you can be a Subway, you can be a Ruth Chris, you can be an independent, and you can tell a story that makes people want to be a part of that family.
Yeah, no question. That's super powerful. And I think that the good news is that if you're a restaurateur listening to this, like, it's not over. Okay. Yeah. You just might have to play the long game. Like you said, this isn't something you're going to fix in a week, but you got to get started. You know what I mean? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. So
right now, baby. Yeah, it's like I told a friend of mine a couple years ago. I have a gym that I'm a partner in, and I had a friend of mine that was coming to the gym to join, and I know his personality. I know he wants something now, and I'm like, hey, bro, did you gain the 100 pounds the past 2 months? Well, no, because you've been eating cheese conies and Snickers and Mountain Dews for the past 10 years, right? Yeah. Well, guess what? You ain't getting out of it in 2 months. Like that 100 pounds is going to be on you, and it's going to go to 90 and then 80 and then 70. And in 2 or 3 years, you're going to be at a point where you're like, I'm there. Now I can maintain. Well, it's the same thing in your restaurant. I tell people with their marketing, with their hiring, with their culture, it's not a switch you can flip in a week or two. If it is a switch you can flip in a week or two, it's a bad switch. Because, you could come on tomorrow and you know what? We now make $40 an hour. We're $40 an hour. And guess what? You're going to have no labor problem, but you're going to be bankrupt in about 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah. No, if it happens quick, it's probably not sticking. Yeah. No question.
Exactly. That's why The Biggest Loser, if you do the research on The Biggest Loser TV show, 99% of them gain every pound of it back within about a year because they never took the time to build a structure of something that's long-term. So I know they can find the podcast on Instagram, but also LinkedIn, right?
Yeah. Also LinkedIn and then our website, RestaurantTopia.com. Yeah.
RestaurantTopia.com. And then last but not least, HillcrestFoods.com. Who's the ideal client? Like if somebody's watching this that should call you, what type of restaurant and what part of Ohio, and like what's your farthest you go out?
Yeah, so we're just to give you the quick, we're basically Youngstown to, let's say, Port Clinton, down to Columbus daily, and then we do some stuff outside of that, but it's really just for people that have grown into those areas. But that's really our sweet spot, that Northeast Ohio Columbus triangle. And then we're all restaurants, so we don't really do schools or nursing homes or any type of institutional business. We're really primarily restaurants, country clubs, anybody, food service. And all local. We don't do any national chains. So I lost you again, Matt. Sorry, I lost your sound again. I don't know if.
hear me now?
Oh, got it. Yep.
Yeah, it's there's a delay when somebody. I got my phone on Do Not Disturb, but I guess if somebody somehow it's getting through and it calls
Okay.
me, it delays it for like 5 seconds. But no, I appreciate that. I appreciate your time today. Appreciate you coming on and giving us your expertise. The menu item is gold. I agree there with not having the menus in house and online. And I'm a big believer in relationships. I think too many times companies flip and flop and look for a deal and look for a price and do this. And if they had stayed packed with the same marketing company and the same consultant, the same food provider for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they'd be in a much better place than they are right now. So appreciate your time. Tune in the podcast, check them out. And hopefully in the near future, America's Best Restaurants will be up north hanging out with David Ross in person. David, thank you, sir.
Love to have you, Matt. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate being on.
See you.